for my life to begin. 'Cause I found that I need desperately my own shoes of traveling. Welcome to our live show, Paul Karolyi from Changing Denver.
Thank you. Good morning, Russ.
We got a podcast brethren here on the set. We're excited to have you. And we've got Murph with the Rocky Flats Cold War Museum. Murph, thank you for joining the show.
You're welcome. I'm here.
We're talking all about Rocky Flats for a little bit here. You guys, if you live in Arvada, you've heard of Rocky Flats. You may not be that educated about what the heck the history is or why it's still in the news and some of the issues going on. That's why we have some experts with us here today. Paul, you've got a podcast in Denver. It's kind of taken Denver by storm. It talks all about life in Denver, and you kind of explore different issues. And this series, you've picked Rocky Flats.
Yes, that's correct. The fourth season of Changing Denver, which we started about a month and a half ago, is it's like you hear on Serial, a true crime series. I've taken that formula and applied it to the Rocky Flats story. And the timing is appropriate because this summer the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is opening the Rocky Flats National Wildlife Refuge, which is just a few miles west of where we sit now, at the site of the former nuclear weapons plant.
We've got some images here we can show you. You guys might, the Cold War horse is kind of famous here in Arvada. It's a horse out by kind of commemorating Rocky Flats. Chris, do we have that? So we can pop that up on the show. Will you tell us about this horse?
Yeah, I can. It was made by an artist named Jeff Geip, local artist / activist. And to my understanding is that it was a protest action put up about 10 years ago to remind the community of this tragic aspect of our collective history.
And we also have some photos of you reporting. You were out reporting. We got some images of kind of current day where this refuge is going to be. So who are we looking at in this photo? The Fish and Wildlife?
Yeah, this is the project lead for the Rocky Flats Refuge. His name is David Lucas. He's from Kentucky, and now he's been working on Rocky Flats for about 10 years. So he does stuff like manage the wildlife, keep an eye on what animals and plants are out there, make sure it's a healthy space. And
so you spent how much time looking into this?
I've been working on this project for about 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah, and the photo that you just saw was from about a year and a half ago, shortly after the Fish and Wildlife Service opened up the refuge to limited tours.
So after 2 years of reporting, I'm sure like the pressing question is, that you get all the time is, well, what is it? I mean, the issue here with Rocky Flats is it used to process plutonium parts for the war, and there were some fires and some environmental contamination, and now we're opening up refuges and we're expanding housing to the area, and the big question is it safe?
Well, yeah, that is definitely the big question, Russ, and that's what my series is going to answer in part. I, unlike many other journalists who have looked into this issue and seen two equal sides, I have found what I think is an answer. And if you subscribe to Changing Denver, you can hear that in a couple of months. But I think the bigger question is, how do we as a community contend with this legacy? It is a tragedy. There was a lot of people that worked there that got sick. They made nuclear weapons, and that's something that we as a people still don't really have an answer to.
We've got some photos, some black and white photos of the plants. Thank you for sending over some great links. There are some great archives. I mean, the Boulder Library has audio, right, of former workers.
Yeah, they have an archive of oral histories. It's more than 100 interviews with former workers, former politicians who worked on oversight bodies, activists who were participating in their way.
And what we're seeing here is just some old black and white pictures of the site. Murph, you're starting the Rocky Flats Cold War Museum, or trying to. You've been one of the guys trying to get that off the ground. Tell us a little bit about the history of this place.
Are you asking for the history of Rocky Flats
of
or
Rocky
the
Flats.
history of the museum?
We're looking at some old photos of Rocky Flats right now. People wearing gloves and glove boxes. What happened there?
Well, by golly, I have to tell you that you don't have enough time for me to sit here and tell you all about it. There is so much history there that it's absolutely amazing. Basically, it was started in 1951. They did a lot of searching and determining where to put the plant, but someone somewhere had to build the trigger mechanisms, which is the center device in the nuclear weapon that actually causes it to become a thermonuclear bomb or whatever. And that's what they made out at Rocky Flats, was the what they call the trigger, or the core, or the central part of it. There was no bombs made out at Rocky Flats. Everything was shipped down to Pantex in Texas for final assembly, whether it was done for submarine missiles or bombs or whatever it was done for. But Rocky Flats was the core. It was the central part and the most important part of the bomb or the missile. It did.
And how many workers? Well, how many? When we talk about workers that might have been impacted by health issues at the plant, there were several big fires that certainly released some bad things into the air. And the big issue is the main issue is the workers that were there during these incidents, but also the people that lived in the surrounding area. How many people are we talking about when we talk about the workers?
Well, when you're talking about a 40-some-odd year span, there were over 50,000 workers totally. Now, not all at one time. Most of the time, there was approximately 2,000 to 3,000 workers, and the later years, there was approximately 8,000 to 10,000 workers.
And Paul, of all the things that you could have picked, your podcast is Denver, right? So
yeah.
you can really kind of pick anything. Why Rocky Flats? Why did this intrigue you so much?
Well, as a journalist, and that's what I do by trade, I have written for a long time about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so when I moved here several years ago, I started this project, and I was looking at physical spaces and people's relationship to them. And I came across this issue by chance. And initially, I sort of saw the outlines of what I was very familiar with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and that's a single place that has become the focus of many, many people's identity. And on all sides, like there's people that hate it just on principle for the fact that it was part of the nuclear weapons industrial complex. Thank you, Russ. And there are people who are enormously proud of the time they spent working patriotically for the defense of our country. And I thought, there's more to it here. There's a real story here.
And so we talked earlier, you drew that comparison of kind of studying the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and you were telling me you kind of came in and were expecting one experience and had a little different while you were reporting. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, my background in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is mostly on the Palestinian side of things. I write for the Journal of Palestine Studies, so I have a natural affinity for the activist groups in that conflict. I
the Downwinders
tend to think that they're
case.
Persuasive. And yeah, in this case, that's where my instincts took me, was to explore the activist side of things first. So I talked to the leaders of the Candelas Glows, Rocky Flats Right to Know. I talked to Leroy Moore of the Rocky Mountain Peace and Justice Center. And I thought collectively they put forward a pretty persuasive case. But then you go over and you talk to the other side, and, well, that's pretty persuasive too.
And is the other side what? Government data?
Yeah, well, the other side is also multi-part.
And we're talking about specifically the issue is it safe, right? That's the whole issue?
Yeah, that's definitely one big part of it now. So the Fish and Wildlife Service is in control of the refuge, which is the buffer zone around the site of the actual plant. The Department of Energy is in control of the site, and then the chief regulators on the site are the Environmental Protection Agency and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment.
Gotcha. And so all the government entities are on the same page. This is safe. We want to open a refuge, and then we've got the Jefferson Parkway also, right?
Yeah, Jefferson County has for a long time wanted to build a parkway through the refuge lands, and it would kind of close the loop of the highway around Denver. And so that's one other controversial aspect of this. That's something that the activists focus on. They want it to stop, essentially.
Speaking of the other side of the government entities involved, Department of Energy, Murph, I know that you for years have been working to open up a Rocky Flats Cold War museum, and you haven't felt like the Department of Energy has been fully supportive. Is that accurate?
Somewhat accurate. I wouldn't say that they haven't been fully supported.
That's what we aim for, somewhat accurate.
They've actually been against us.
Have they fought against you? Tell me about it.
Well, we have had, for instance, we had a congressional grant to get the museum started, and but the congressional grant came through the Department of Energy. And Department of Energy told us, for instance, that we could not use it to advance the museum. We had to use it to provide only. And so therefore we couldn't use the money to help us raise the money to build a building. And it wasn't near enough to build a building.
Some bureaucratic red tape jiu-jitsu.
Yes, we did. And
Okay.
it's been a mess.
Paul, what do you think about that? I mean, do you feel like this museum should exist?
Yeah, I think it's a shame. I would love for this to be, in actuality. I think it would be appropriate for History Colorado to incorporate it. I would think it would be appropriate for the Fish and Wildlife Service to incorporate it into the visitor center that they're planning.
Guys, can you imagine the tourism appeal of a Rocky Flats museum, right?
Absolutely. And we have the backing of all of those entities, but none of them have the money that they can hand us to build the museum.
All right, so if we got any
Jefferson
slick
County,
lobbyists
Boulder
out there that know how to deal with these federal bureaucrats, get in touch with us at the Awesome Pod. Maybe we'll get you a free T-shirt. Guys, we would love to have you back on. We would love to get you on the podcast and talk more about this. But, guys, lucky for you, you can hear them on the Changing Denver podcast. How do people go over to that?
You can find the podcast at www.changingdenver.com or the Apple Podcasts directory and any other place where good podcasts can be found.
And in this week's Awesome Pod podcast, we played a little teaser clip. So check that out. We'll play another teaser clip on Monday. So just check out the Awesome Pod podcast if you want a teaser of Paul's podcast. We're getting a little meta. I think we're going to go to a video.
C280 Angler is passionate about service and wild about fish.
All right. Hey, Awesome Pod viewers. Welcome back. It's Katie, and I'm really excited here to be talking to Elizabeth Panzer. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
I know you're here representing the Downwinders, and, it's for all of us that are not from Colorado or not from this area, it's really important that we come here and talk to people like you and talk to Murph Widdowfield from the Cold War Museum and you see Paul's documentary, our podcast series, because we want to know what's going on, right?
Right.
So how did you get, you're a part of the Downwinders group. Can you tell me how you got started or how you got affiliated with that group, and then what is the Downwinders organization?
I am from here, but I moved away after college. So when we moved back, we ended up moving into the area. It was the first development that had been built in a long time. It's 5 Parks, 86 in Indiana. So I'd never researched the issue of Rocky Flats. I grew up here. It just was in the background. I thought it was political.
Right.
So how I got involved was my son actually developed a very rare form of heart cancer, very aggressive. At the same time, a neighbor did. We both lived there for 10 years, very outdoor people. And so it was kind of a wake-up call, like, what's going on?
Right. So that piqued your interest. And so the Downwinders have on the website, which is great, what is a Downwinder, and it's that geographical area. But the organization itself, what are the issues today that the Rocky Flats Downwinders are educating on or trying to connect with the community about? What's a main concern?
First of all, we're not a political organization. We're interested in health. It's a loosely organized group that was created in 2014 of people who either live or have lived near this Rocky Flats weapons production former plant, and we're interested in advocating for more studies, health studies. This whole area, the long-term effects of living near plutonium or other contaminants they've been undocumented and uninvestigated.
Well, you know what, that's what we do Awesome Pod for. Is the thing we do it is to bring all of that stuff you find when a Google search together here. We ask questions and we try to get our community connected to go out and get informed and educated yourself.